Imagine a quiet morning. You wake up, the light pouring through the window frame, and you realize that beside you is a space. No one to say good morning, no one texting to ask whether you've had breakfast. But strangely, this time you don't feel lonely. You simply sit still, take a deep breath, and sense a peace you once hated and always tried to escape. Because you understand now that not every relationship is true love, and not every loneliness is sorrow. Carl Jung once said, "The meeting of two souls is a sacred moment, but it only happens when both have met themselves first." Perhaps true love doesn't come to fill you, but to illuminate the part of you that you once denied. And if you're wondering whether the person beside you is truly the one, or just a lesson on your path of growing up, then in this video, I will help you recognize the 5 deepest signs Jung believed only appear when you are experiencing the love of your life, the kind of love that makes you peaceful, strong, and no longer needing to prove anything to anyone. 1. When the other person awakens, the rest of you, many people in their middle age often say they no longer believe in true love. Not because they have never loved, but because they have gone through too many moments when they thought they had found the one. They once tried to hold on, endured the pain, and hoped that if they were good enough, patient enough, forgiving enough, the other person would stay. Yet all those efforts dissolved like morning mist. What remained was only an emptiness, silent and heavy. And in that emptiness they began to ask themselves, maybe I no longer have the capacity to love, as I once did. But in truth, the right question is not whether you can still love, but which part of you wants to be loved. Carl Jung once said, "The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed." When you meet someone who makes your heart tremble, it is not merely emotion. It is the signal of a profound transformation beginning to take place in the unconscious. Within every man exists an unconscious feminine side, which Jung called the anima. Within every woman exists an unconscious masculine side, which Jung called the animus. These two aspects are not abstract concepts, but the hidden parts of the self, formed by early impressions of one's father or mother, and continually shaped through every relationship one experiences. When you meet the right person, the strange thing is that they don't just make you feel a spark, they make you open up. It could be a man who was once tough and rational, suddenly finding himself gentler, more attentive, able to touch emotional layers he used to avoid. Or it could be a woman who once lived quietly, defined by sacrifice, suddenly realizing within herself a steady strength, a confident sense of leadership she never believed she possessed. That is the moment when the anima and animus within you awaken. That feeling is often indescribable. You may feel both familiar and strange, as if you've met them before, somewhere far away in another time. Jung called that moment archetypal resonance. When your soul recognizes the lost part of itself reflected in another person. It's no coincidence that many people say, "It feels like coming home." But this is not surface-level chemistry, not fleeting attraction. It's a deep awareness within the unconscious, where one archetype meets another. For many, this awakening begins with fear. It feels as if someone is walking into your mind, touching memories you thought were locked away. They expose you not only the beautiful parts but also what you've long denied. You feel vulnerable, disoriented, yet somehow unable to walk away, because that person makes you feel alive in a way you never have before. Many people at 45 or 50 have experienced that feeling and then tormented themselves, asking, "Am I crazy? At this age, how can I still lose control of my heart?" But in truth, what's happening is not loss of control, it's rebirth. The self you've built for half a lifetime, the resilient woman. The rational man suddenly trembles upon meeting the rest of itself. Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." That person is not your destiny from the outside, but the mirror through which your inner unconscious begins to speak. In modern culture, where love has been reduced to popular psychology formulas or dating tips, the resonance between anima and animus has almost been forgotten. But when you reach a certain age of experience, when past relationships have fallen away like autumn leaves, your soul begins to seek something deeper. You no longer crave the person who makes your heart race. You crave the one who makes you whole. Imagine you've lived your entire life as only half of yourself, either too strong or too sensitive, always carrying responsibility or always fearing abandonment. When you meet the right person, that missing energy awakens, and because of that, you feel as though your life is being stirred up. But that turbulence is the beginning of balance. Jung called this the process of individuation, the journey through which the soul seeks to unite its opposites to return to wholeness. Someone once asked, if that person is only meant to stay for a while and then leave, what's the meaning of it? The truth is, they didn't come to stay. They came to awaken. Such an encounter isn't measured by time but by the depth of inner transformation. If, after meeting them, you find yourself braver, more self-aware, and more authentic, then that love, however brief, was real, because it did exactly what love is meant to do: bring you closer to the self, the original being Jung spoke of. In many modern neurological studies, scientists have found that when someone feels deeply connected to another person, the brain doesn't just release oxytocin or dopamine, it also activates areas linked to memory and identity. That means the other person doesn't just make you happy, they make you remember. Remember something not belonging to time, but to the soul. That sense of already knowing confuses many people, as if they were recalling a dream from a past life. But the awakening of anima and animus isn't always gentle. Sometimes it comes as conflict, contradiction, or even pain. The other person may wound you deeply not because they are cruel, but because they mirror the parts of you you haven't dared to face. They make you angry, sad, but at the same time, they make you grow. Jung once wrote, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain. Every wound in that relationship is a doorway leading you to a deeper understanding of yourself." If you're in a relationship where you feel reborn yet confused, afraid yet grateful, don't rush to judge it as right or wrong, because perhaps you're walking through the very first stage of true love, the activation of the rest of your soul. Many people think perfect love means harmony, no arguments, no conflict. But Jung saw it differently. He believed that when anima and animus meet, opposing energies collide fiercely, like fire and wind. If you can stand still in that storm without running, without trying to control, you will discover something miraculous. That very clash awakens you, transforming both energies from passion into awareness. That's why, after moments of conflict, you may feel the relationship has grown deeper. Because you're not only communicating with the other person, you're communicating with the deepest part of yourself through them. You might have thought that love, as you grow older, becomes calmer. But in truth, when the soul matures, love becomes more intense, not in the impulsive sense, but in the transformative one. Because now, you no longer love to be validated. You love to be understood. And when you meet the right person, they don't make you forget who you are, they help you remember yourself. Notice how sometimes in silence that person makes you wonder, why have I never said this to anyone else? They don't lecture, don't try to save you, they just are there. And through that presence, they melt you. Because they've awakened the part of you you once hid. Jung believed true harmony only exists when both people are willing to let their unconscious be seen. No one is perfect. No one is entirely light. We can only love deeply when we allow both light and shadow to coexist. When you feel that someone could change the direction of your life, don't be afraid. It's not loss of control. It's your soul choosing to evolve. True love doesn't come to keep you safe. It comes to help you grow. And sometimes, that growth begins with a single touch gentle enough to awaken, deep enough to transform. So if you've ever met someone who makes your heart both excited and warm, yet scared someone who makes the world seem as though it's changing color, know that it isn't madness. It simply means the anima or animus within you is awakening. And that awakening, whether brief or lasting, is the first gift of true love, the gift that stops you from sleeping through your own role and begins your journey as a soul finding its way home. 2. When that person sees even the things you want to hide, sometimes, true love doesn't arrive in the moments when you feel your brightest. It comes when you are weak, lost, and too tired to pretend to be strong anymore. You know that feeling, don't you? When you're exhausted from always having to be okay, to smile, to act as though you've moved on from your past. When people only like the cheerful, positive version of you, while the parts that are conflicted, stubborn and wounded. No one wants to see them. And then, one day, someone appears. They don't need you to try at all. They see through your smile. They see your fear, your anger, your doubt. And instead of being afraid, they choose to stay. Carl Jung once said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." No one becomes whole by avoiding their own darkness. Yet most of us fear doing exactly that. We're afraid others will see us as selfish, weak, or too emotional. We're afraid of being judged or left behind, so we hide, we perform. Men act strong when all they want is to be held. Women act gently when their hearts are screaming from being forgotten. But real love doesn't need those performances. Real love begins when you meet someone who makes your shadow no longer need to hide. The shadow, in Jung's philosophy, is the repressed part of ourselves, the instincts, emotions, and memories we don't want to face. But if you're hearing this in middle age, you've probably realized by now, the very things we reject are the ones that shape us the most. When you meet someone who can see those parts without fear, your soul exhales. You no longer have to shrink yourself to be loved. You are loved despite, or rather, because of the parts that make you seem imperfect. That person doesn't tell you that you're perfect. They don't idealize you. But somehow, they see beauty, even in the cracks. They see you being critical, yet behind that criticism are the eyes of someone who always wants to understand more deeply, who wishes the world could be better. They see you as stubborn, but within that stubbornness lies a loyalty to pure core values, a will not to lose yourself. They see you as sensitive, easily hurt, but it is that very sensitivity that gives you sharp intuition, the ability to touch others' emotions with your heart. In such a relationship, conflict is no longer something to fear. It becomes something sacred. Jung called it the sacred conflict, where two souls grow by daring to face each other's darkness. You can't learn this through shallow love. Only when you meet someone deep enough do you finally dare to examine yourself that closely. Think back. Has anyone ever made you so angry that you had to ask yourself, why am I reacting this strongly? Perhaps that person was touching a part of you that had never been seen before. And if you are brave enough not to run away, you'll discover something miraculous, that they didn't come to hurt you, but to help you heal. There's a Western proverb that says, if you want to know who you truly are, look at who triggers you the most. When someone provokes a strong reaction in you, it's a sign that your shadow is speaking. But if they stay, if they don't try to fix you, don't judge you, but simply look at you with steady, quiet presence, then perhaps you've met the one meant for you. As we age, many people grow weary of comfortable relationships. They no longer want peaceful evenings filled with empty minds. They crave someone deep enough to make them feel alive. That person may not always make you happy, but they make you genuine. And in that truth, you begin to learn how to love yourself. Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." But we cannot do that alone. It takes someone brave enough to stand before our shadow without fear. Someone who loves us not for our light, but for our wholeness, for both light and dark together. Many people in their 50s have said they once met such a person. Not someone who made them wildly infatuated, but someone who made them re-examine their entire life. A person who made them ask, how long have I lived without ever allowing anyone to see who I really am? Conversations with that person may have been few, but their echoes lasted long. They could be silent for hours and still feel connected. They didn't need many words, because what was shared wasn't in what was said, but in what was deeply seen. In the film Good Will Hunting, there's a famous scene where Sean tells Will, "You're not perfect. Sport. And let me save you the suspense. This girl you met isn't perfect either. But the question is whether or not you're perfect for each other." True love doesn't require perfection. It requires two people deep enough to see the shadow in each other and still choose to stay. When someone helps you integrate your shadow, they are not just a lover. They are a guide, a teacher on your soul's journey. They make you stop running from yourself, and in doing so, you become freer than ever before. You begin to see that the parts you once felt ashamed of have become your sources of strength. Excessive criticism turns into refined perception. Stubbornness becomes steadfastness. Sensitivity becomes emotional intelligence. And when two people walk through that stage together facing their darkness without abandoning each other, their bond transcends the idea of romantic partnership. It becomes a form of spiritual companionship, a ritual of the soul, where each person illuminates the other. If you're in a relationship where you don't have to pretend, don't have to hide your fears, don't have to be strong all the time, cherish it, because you are experiencing one of the rarest and deepest signs of true love. The other person has seen your darkness, and they have chosen to stay. Because in the end, love is not the light that drives out darkness. Love is when two people sit together in the dark, and together, they light a single lamp that harmonizes with the world beyond. 3. Synchronicity appears as a whisper from the universe. There are love stories that don't begin with pursuit, but with a strange chain of coincidences, a wrong call, a random seat next to someone, or an afternoon when you took a different route and happened to meet them in a crowd. You think it's just a chance. But then something makes you wonder, why did this person appear exactly when you felt most empty? Why, when you thought your heart had closed, did someone arrive who, with just one glance, made all your defenses begin to melt? Jung called this phenomenon synchronicity, meaningful coincidences, events that can't be explained by probability or logic. Carl Jung once said, "Synchronicity is an ever-present reality for those who have eyes to see." When you start living with awareness, the small coincidences in life no longer feel random. They become signals. Encounters, casual words, even songs that play at the perfect moment all seem to be trying to tell you something. And if you are on a journey of rediscovering yourself, perhaps you've already felt that kind of energy. When you meet someone who belongs in your life, you'll notice that the world around you seems to breathe in rhythm with the two of you. Those accidental meetings repeat again and again. You decide to take another path, but change your mind at the last minute, and there they are, standing right where you turn. You think of them, and moments later, your phone lights up with a message from them. You hear a song, and the lyrics seem to tell your story. You dream of them, and the next morning, they describe a dream just like yours. That isn't superstition. It's the resonance between two energy fields that have found matching frequencies. Jung described this state as mystical participation, when two people connect not only through words, but through a deeper layer of the unconscious. They can sense each other's pain or joy even from afar. Some couples have shared stories of falling ill on the same day, seeing the same symbol in a dream, or having the same thought at different times. To Jung, that wasn't a coincidence, it was proof of the collective participation of the unconscious, where two souls touch the same symbolic current of the universe. If you've ever loved in that way, you know it isn't sentimental romance, but something deeper, as if your soul has found a missing piece of itself. You don't force that connection. It happens as naturally as breathing. You don't read them with logic, but with feeling. When they're sad, you feel your heart sink, even though no words are spoken. When they're in danger, you sense unease without knowing why. Many people have shared that they simply felt the need to call, and in doing so, saved the person they loved from an accident. You may not believe in energy, but perhaps the universe believes in you. If signs 1 and 2 speak of awakening within, then synchronicity is the external evidence that your unconscious is at work. When your mind and soul begin to resonate with another person, the world around you seems to conspire to bring you together as if an invisible hand is rearranging time, space, and circumstance. Jung once said, "We are not of today or yesterday. We are of an immeasurable age." Some souls have met many times before, in different forms, in stories we no longer remember. And when they meet again, even in this lifetime amid city noise or through a fleeting conversation, they recognize each other not with their eyes, but through the vibration of the heart. Think of the moment when you're sitting quietly and suddenly think of someone for no reason. A minute later they text you, "I was just thinking of you." That isn't magic. It's the manifestation of synchronicity. Two frequencies resonating in perfect phase within the same moment. Those who have loved deeply often say, "I can feel them," no matter where they are. And when you reach that level of connection, you'll understand why love is not just an emotion, it is a subtle, invisible language of the soul. In middle age, many people believe they've lost the ability to trust in divine timing. Yet, at some point, something so coincidental happens that it makes them pause, look up at the sky, and smile. Maybe something greater is still guiding me. And in that exact moment, they begin to step beyond rigid logic and start believing in meaning, not the meaning of everything, but the meaning of what is unfolding within their own lives. Remember, Jung was not a dreamer. He was a psychiatrist, a scientist, a man who observed hundreds of patients and noticed symbolic coincidences appearing repeatedly with an underlying order. He wrote, "Synchronicity reveals the meaningful connection between inner and outer events. The outer world is not separate from our inner consciousness. When your inner state changes, circumstances begin to shift as well. When you are truly ready to receive someone, the universe begins to rearrange events for you. You may be hearing this after a broken marriage, or after years of believing you'll never meet someone right for you again. But remember, the universe doesn't work by schedule. It works by depth of readiness. When you've learned the lessons you needed to learn, when you've dared to look within instead of blaming others, when your heart no longer closes, but quietly opens, miracles happen. And they usually arrive not with noise or grandeur, but through a sequence of small, seemingly ordinary moments filled with meaning. One morning you run late and choose a different cafe, and there, you meet them. One day you decide to stay home, but change your mind, and in the place you never planned to go, you hear that voice. That is when synchronicity begins to work. It doesn't need fireworks or infatuation, only a single second, when you feel, "I've been here before." At a deeper level, when two people have truly harmonized, synchronicity doesn't only happen when they are near each other, but even when they are far apart. They begin to listen to each other in silence. When one is in pain, the other feels it. When one is afraid, the other wakes up. It's not because they have telepathy, but because their two unconscious fields have merged into the same flow of energy. Like two instruments tuned to the same key, they still create the same melody even when apart. And perhaps that's why true love makes you calmer instead of obsessed. Because you feel that even in separation, that energy still exists. It doesn't depend on words or physical presence. It's a kind of invisible thread that connects two souls evolving together. Many people once asked Jung, "How can I know if I'm in a destined connection?" He replied simply, "When you no longer chase meaning, but meaning starts chasing you. That is the sign that the universe is responding." If you've ever experienced that feeling, the unbelievable chain of coincidences, the moments when you think of someone and they appear, don't dismiss it as illusion. Pause and listen. Because it may be the universe's whisper telling you that you're on the right path. True love, at its deepest level, is not just two people meeting, it is two unconscious streams finding each other again. And when that happens, everything within you, your intuition, your emotions, even those strange coincidences, becomes part of the music that guides your way. So if your heart is echoing with a call you can't explain, if you feel you know someone before you truly understand them, don't try to rationalize it. Maybe you're not losing your mind. Maybe you're simply being guided back to where you belong. And the universe, as it always does, is softly whispering, "It's time." 4. When that person awakens many versions of you at once, have you ever realized that some people step into your life not just to love you, but to awaken you? They make you laugh differently, think differently, live differently. They touch the places you thought were closed off, the dreams you left behind, the abilities you no longer believed you ever had. Before meeting them, you thought you knew who you were. But after meeting them, you suddenly realize there are many versions of yourself you never dared to acknowledge. Carl Jung once said, "The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed." When two souls truly meet, neither remains the same. Both are transformed not by power, but by resonance. In the collective unconscious of every person, Jung believed there exist hundreds of archetypes, ancient symbolic figures that live within the human psyche, representing different aspects of the soul. There are the archetypes of the lover, the warrior, the sage, the creator, the caregiver, and also the trickster, the child eternal. Most of us live out only a small portion of these archetypes, shaped by social roles or the fears we've carried since childhood. But when you meet the right person, something extraordinary happens. They don't just love you in one dimension, they awaken multiple dimensions within you. Beside them, you become more creative, stronger, braver, deeper not because they inspire you, but because they unlock layers of your being that have been asleep for too long. When someone makes you feel like you want to create and learn, to protect and to let go at the same time, it isn't a contradiction, it's expansion. They are helping you come into contact with the full map of your soul. You start to write, even though you once feared expression. You begin to speak your mind, even though you once chose silence. You take risks, travel to places you never dared to go, simply because someone made you believe you could. And in return, they too are changed. They learn patience from you, compassion, and the courage to face their own emotions. Relationships like these, Jung called numinous encounters. Not every relationship has the capacity to awaken on such a profound level. Many loves exist only on the surface emotional, physical, or momentary companionship. But a connection rooted in archetype stirs something deeper, where the unconscious begins to move, and the true self begins to awaken. In middle age, when people have gone through much loss and experience, most live as limited versions of themselves. They know how to survive, but have forgotten how to live. They know how to love safely but have forgotten what it feels like to love with the soul. They may be successful, yet they feel empty, as if some part of them has never been touched. And then, someone appears not making promises, but simply making them feel alive again. When that person looks at you, you don't just see who you are now, you see the potential you once lost. They are not a mirror, but a spark of awakening. You may have been someone fearful, yet beside them, you dare to speak. You may have been exhausted, yet beside them, creative energy begins to flow. They make you want to be a lover, a warrior, a sage, and a child all at once. Jung believed that in fated connections, the total psyche of one person activates the total psyche of the other. Both become catalysts for each other, not to complete one another, but to expand each other. You may feel confused, because such a relationship is rarely peaceful. It challenges you, pulls you out of your comfort zone, and forces you to confront aspects of yourself you didn't know existed. But through that process, you become more authentic. You're no longer trapped in social roles, the mother, the wife, the provider, but return to being a whole human being, full of layers and complexity. Remember those moments when you loved someone and suddenly wanted to write, to cook, to learn music, to slow down, to forgive that wasn't them changing you. It was them calling forth what had always been within you. When someone activates the archetypes inside you, your life begins to expand in many directions. Everything seems deeper. A song, a sunset, a simple sentence suddenly becomes sacred. You start to realize that love isn't just a romantic emotion, but a mechanism of the soul's evolution. For many Americans between 45 and 60, this stage of life often comes with a hollow space, children leaving home, careers stable but uninspired, marriages cooling or breaking apart. Many begin to ask themselves, is this really all there is? When they meet someone who makes them wake up each morning with a sense of excitement not from desire, but from the feeling of returning to themselves, that is when the archetype begins to move. They find themselves wanting to carry the archetype of the nurturer awakens. They feel the urge to fight for something, the warrior is stirred. They want to learn, to listen, to share. The sage begins to speak, and most importantly, they find themselves wanting to live more beautifully, not to be loved, but to be worthy of the other's presence. Such encounters, according to Jung, are not accidental. He called them destined encounters, because they mark a turning point of the soul. You no longer live by memory or fear, but by creativity and courage. You are no longer a half seeking completion, but a whole expanding beyond itself. A clear example is the love story between writer Rainer Maria Rilke and Lou Andreas Salome, the woman who transformed Rilke from a young romantic poet into one of the deepest thinkers of the century. Lou did not come to love in the traditional sense. She came to awaken within him multiple layers of being the lover, the poet, the sage, and even the student. Jung once cited this story as a classic example of the activation of archetypes through love, where two souls meet to catalyze each other's evolution. As you hear these words, think back to someone you once met who made you feel all those states at once. A person who challenged you and healed you at the same time. Someone who made it impossible for you to return to your old self because they had opened too many doors within. Such love is not loud. It doesn't need to promise forever. It only needs to make you more real every day. And when that happens, you'll understand that sometimes the universe doesn't send us the perfect person to love, but the perfect person to awaken us. Carl Jung once said, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. But when you meet the right person, you're no longer afraid of that, because they've shown you that in every version of yourself, from weak to strong, from confused to clear, you are worthy of love." And perhaps that is the true miracle of real love. It doesn't turn you into someone else. It makes you become everything you already are. It helps your soul remember who it has always been. 5. When the story of your life becomes complete. There are moments when you sit alone, looking back on everything you've been through, the losses, the betrayals, the sleepless nights, the loves that seemed eternal but faded away, and you ask yourself, what was all of that for? At a certain stage of life, especially when you reach your 40s or 50s, when the shells of success or failure have already drifted away, that question becomes more haunting than ever. People begin to search for a deeper meaning, a reason behind the quiet loneliness that still lingers inside. And that is what Jung called the personal myth. Carl Jung believed that every person lives according to a profound story, a myth that their soul is trying to retell through every action, every choice, every relationship. He wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. But to become yourself, you must first understand the story that life is trying to write through you. When you meet the right person, it's not just love, it's the harmony between two myths. That person doesn't change your path, they make it meaningful. Suddenly, the things that once caused you pain begin to glow, as if they had always been arranged to bring you here. You look back at your past and, for the first time, see a strange coherence. All the failures, the detours, the broken relationships, they were necessary pieces, shaping you to be deep enough, patient enough, and conscious enough to recognize this person." Jung once said, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain. There is no awakening without suffering. But that pain is not meaningless. When you meet the one who truly belongs to you, all your old wounds seem to be healed. They are no longer just sad memories, but signs. You understand that if you had never been lost, you would never know the value of being found. If you had never been lonely, you would never know how to truly be present with another. True love, according to Jung, does not come to make you happy in a fleeting sense, but to help you fulfill your own myth. When two people meet and awaken together, it is not dependency, it is the merging of two journeys, where each person's story helps the others become more complete. They don't possess one another. They co-create a new myth, a myth of growth, of meaning, of light passing through darkness. There's a little-known story about Jung. During a lecture with students, he was asked, "Sir, how do we know if someone is our destiny?" Jung smiled, paused for a moment, and replied, "When the story of your life starts making sense, when your life story begins to take shape, when what once caused you pain starts aligning into meaningful order, that's when you know you've met the right person." If you are hearing this, perhaps you have gone through years that once felt meaningless. Perhaps you have loved, lost, and promised yourself never to open your heart again. And then, someone appeared not to make you forget the past, but to help you understand why it had to happen. They did not come to fill the void, but to complete it. When two people merge their myths, they begin to see that everything has a reason. Someone who was once a lonely warrior now learns gentleness. Someone who once cared for everyone now learns how to be cared for. The broken fragments of life start to connect into a larger story, the story of healing. Jung called this stage individuation, the process by which a person becomes whole by integrating the conscious and the unconscious, the rational and the spiritual, the ego and the shadow. True love is the highest form of that process. It is no longer about you and me, but us as two parts of the same myth. A 58-year-old woman once shared that after losing her husband to illness, she thought her life was over. But 5 years later, she met a man who had endured the same kind of loss. They did not come together out of passion, but through quiet peace. "When I sit beside him," she said, "I see all the years I lost, the pain I endured, The moments I thought I'd never rise again, all of it leading me here. We're not beginning a new chapter. We're writing a meaningful ending to two separate books. Jung once said, "The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed." When two souls truly touch, both are transformed not only in the present, but throughout the entire story of their lives. Take a look back at your own journey. You may have taken wrong turns, loved the wrong people, trusted the wrong hearts. But without those mistakes, you wouldn't have become the kind of person deep enough to recognize true love. Your myth was never meant to be a perfect story. It was meant to be the one true to your soul. In middle age, many begin to realize that happiness no longer lies in success, but in meaning. They want to look back on their lives and see a red thread weaving through it all, something that turns every scattered chapter into one complete book. And when they meet someone who can read that book, who understands even the chapters no one else could, that is the moment their personal myth comes alive. True love doesn't come to change your story, but to make you realize you are already living a story worth telling. And when both people live with that awareness that every step, every choice, every wound carries meaning, they begin to write a shared myth. Not the myth of two perfect beings, but of two souls slowly becoming themselves. Carl Jung once said, "Who looks outside, dreams. Who looks inside, awakes." When you love the right person, you begin to awaken. You no longer chase a perfect future. You look deeply into the present, where everything happens for a reason, where the past is forgiven, and where you finally understand. Every road has led you here, to the right person, at the right time, in the right way. And that is the pinnacle of love, when your story is no longer unfinished, but complete. Not because it ends beautifully, but because you finally understand the meaning of every chapter. Post-transformation, when love becomes the mirror of the soul. After all the lessons, after you have recognized the 5 signs of true love, another question begins to echo inside you, slowly, softly, yet persistently. So what if that person has already left? You look around, and there are no more tears, no more burning pain like before. But there is another kind of silence, wide, hollow, and unnamed. The silence of those who once loved deeply and have learned not to resent. It is no longer the pain of loss, but the emptiness that follows after the soul has awakened. Carl Jung once said, "Where love rules, there is no will to power, and where power predominates, there love is lacking." True love is not where you try to control or possess, but where you are free. And when that love passes through you, it leaves behind a different energy, not romantic emotions anymore, but a new awareness of existence. That is when you enter the phase Jung calls the post-individuation phase. You no longer hurt because you lost the one who once loved you, but sometimes you feel empty because you don't know yet what it means to love on a higher level. Before, you were familiar with the dopamine of presence, messages, glances, evenings with someone by your side. Now, you begin to crave another kind of dopamine, the spiritual dopamine, the thrilling sense of realizing that your soul is expanding. You begin to understand that love is no longer a person, but a state of being. It is when you are fully present, aware that everything that ever came, whether beautiful or painful, was part of the journey back to the self, your highest essence. Jung called it the transcendent function, where love becomes a bridge between the conscious and the unconscious. When a relationship dissolves, that energy does not disappear. It merely changes form, transforming into awareness, into a new light illuminating the deeper layers within you that you had never seen before. Think back to the last time you loved someone with your whole heart. When they left, you felt as if you had lost everything. But then, somehow, you kept living, and even lived more deeply. You began reading more, listening to yourself more, becoming kinder, more creative, more courageous. That was not what love took from you, but what it returned to you after completing its mission. Think of Elizabeth Gilbert, the author of Eat, Pray, Love. She lost a marriage that once seemed perfect, then set out to find herself through 3 countries, 3 experiences, 3 different layers of spirituality. She did not find her old love, but she found her true essence. Jung would likely call that the moment when the self rises through the remnants of the ego in love. Because sometimes, only when the heart breaks, does the soul finally have space to breathe. Or like Eckhart Tolle, who once shared that he went through a night of despair so deep he wanted to end everything, and in the moment of total surrender, he realized something profound. I can't live with myself anymore. But if I can't live with myself, then there must be two selves. One is the I that is present, and the other is the myself, the part that rarely reveals itself fully to society. Perhaps only one of them is real. That moment is precisely the transcendent function at work, where the ego dissolves, consciousness opens, and love is redefined not as something between two people, but as something between you and your own soul. True love doesn't come to stay, it comes so that you can stay with yourself. This sentence may sound paradoxical, but if you have walked through heartbreak and still feel gratitude, you will understand. That person was only the mirror. True love is the light within you shining through that mirror. And when the mirror breaks, the light remains. It no longer depends on the shape of the reflection. It begins to shine from within. You don't need to force yourself to forget them, nor do you need to hold on to them. See love as a meditation lesson, where every emotion is a wave, and you are the ocean behind those waves. The wave may dissolve, but the ocean does not. When you love from the deeper layers of consciousness, you no longer love to possess someone, but to understand yourself better. Carl Jung once wrote, "Your vision will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. Who looks outside, dreams. Who looks inside, awakes." When you look outward, you dream of a person, a happiness, an ending. But when you turn inward, you awaken and realize that love never truly left. It simply changed form, from the shape of a person into creative energy, into compassion, into the capacity to be present. Someone once asked me, "What if that love only came to awaken me, not to stay?" I replied, "Then it has fulfilled its mission." Not everyone who appears in your life is meant to stay until the end. Some come to show you how deeply you can love and how much you can endure. Some come to remind you that your heart still knows how to respond, and there are those who, just by passing through, leave within you an open door, a door that leads you home. Love, at its highest level, becomes creative libido. You begin to use the very energy that once caused you pain to write, to paint, to build, to live more truthfully. You no longer chase love, but allow love to flow through everything you do. You turn longing into art, loneliness into presence, and the past into material for growth. If you are in this phase not hurting anymore, yet still feeling empty, try doing one small thing. Write a letter. Not to send to that person. Send it to the part of your soul that they awakened in you. Write as if you are speaking to the part of yourself that once loved wholeheartedly, collapsed, once survived. Thank them, then fold it. Place it somewhere sacred. Because it is proof that you once knew how to love in the way the universe wanted you to love. Finally, when you look into the mirror, not the physical mirror, but the mirror of consciousness, you will see that love is no longer a face. It is the light reflecting your own soul. And when you can love without needing to possess, when you can lose without feeling incomplete, when you can miss someone without begging for their return, you have begun to love at a higher level. Carl Jung once said something simple yet profound. The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. Perhaps love never disappears. It only changes shape from a person to energy, from longing to understanding, from loss to presence. And if you once lost someone but found yourself afterward, then congratulations, you have stepped into the deepest layer of love, where there is no longer me and them, but only light reflecting itself. Personal awakening. When darkness becomes light, there is a moment in the journey of growth that everyone will pass through. When you realize that the people who once hurt you were actually reflecting the parts of yourself you never dared to look at. It is no longer the stage of wanting to strike back or run away, but the moment you begin to ask, what if the person who hurt me was actually the messenger of my awakening? That question opens a door, and on the other side is not heaven but a mirror, where the shadow is waiting for you to look directly at it. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. Until you dare to name the unconscious within you, it will continue to control you, and you will call it destiny. Pain is never random. Every person who makes you angry, jealous, afraid, or ashamed is helping you see something you have not been ready to accept about yourself. They are the mirror of the rejected shadow. I know. Maybe you were betrayed. Maybe someone made you believe you were not good enough, not worthy of being loved. But if you look deeper, you will see. What hurt you was not that person, but the part within you that believed you were unworthy. When you realize that, you have already walked half the path to freedom. Look at Robin Williams, the actor who made the whole world laugh, yet carried a lonely soul within him. His life is the perfect example of what Jung called shadow integration. He transformed his sadness into creative energy, into joy, for millions of others. Beneath the laughter was a profound emptiness, but he used it as fuel to connect. The shadow in him was not buried, it was transformed. In the 2000s, psychologist Martin Seligman introduced the concept of positive psychology. He studied thousands of people who had gone through trauma and discovered that about 70% of them, after the shock, grew stronger than before. He called this phenomenon post-traumatic growth. The pain did not kill them. It taught them how to live truthfully. It made them more grateful, more profound, more creative. And this is not unfamiliar to Jung, who always believed that the shadow is the greatest teacher of the self. You can see this in Keanu Reeves. He lost the woman he loved in an accident, lost the child who never had the chance to be born, and lost his best friend. But instead of resentment, he chose silence. Not the silence of pain, but the silence of someone who has understood that life is unfair, yet we can choose to respond to it with fairness. He turned loss into compassion. He became the kind of man people feel peaceful, just standing near. That is the expression of a shadow that has been integrated, no longer controlling, but becoming a source of light. When you enter this stage, you begin to understand. Every wound is an invitation. Every time someone makes you angry, jealous, or hurt, it is not a tragedy, but a part of you calling out to be seen. Jung said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. You cannot awaken by looking only at the light, but by daring to face the darkness within yourself." Many people have asked me, how do I forgive the one who hurt me? Forgiveness does not mean forgetting. Forgiveness is when you look back and understand. I once needed that lesson to become who I am today. Forgiveness is when you stop asking, why did they do that? And begin asking, what is this trying to teach me about myself? If you have ever felt deeply hurt by someone, try pausing, taking a slow breath, and asking, what part of me is being invited to be seen? It may be the wounded part from childhood, the part that always wants to be acknowledged, the part that fears abandonment, or the part that keeps pretending to be strong so it won't be hurt again. When you dare to name that part, you have begun the process of integration. And from that moment, the pain no longer controls you. Jung believed that every time we face the darkness, we are touching the threshold of true power. He said, "In all chaos there is a cosmos. In all disorder, a secret order. In chaos, there is order. In darkness, there is light." When you no longer fear your own darkness, you begin to understand that it is the part that contains the deepest creative and empathetic energy. I remember once, a middle-aged woman shared with me that after her divorce, she felt she had lost everything: her husband, her friends, her social standing. But one night, while sitting alone in an empty room, she began to cry not because she was lonely, but because she realized, this is the first time I don't need anyone to feel that I exist. In that moment, her darkness, the fear of being abandoned, became the source of her freedom. You can start with very small things. Every time you are emotionally triggered, angry, hurt, afraid, don't react immediately. Place your hand on your chest and ask, who within me is speaking? It may be the child who was once scolded, the woman who was once belittled, the man who was once dismissed. Listen to them. without judgment, without pushing them away, because only when you acknowledge them do they finally dissolve. Darkness is not the enemy. It is the strictest teacher, and also the most honest teacher. It does not lie to you with comforting words. It teaches you through truth, and every time you are brave enough to face it, the darkness blooms into a flower. Jung once compared it this way. The shadow is the seed. If you water it with awareness, it will bloom into light. From pain to awareness to power, that is the real path of awakening. When you fight the pain, you are a victim. When you begin to observe it, you are a student. But when you use it as fuel to live more truthfully, more creatively, and more lovingly, you become the creator of your own life. Pain is no longer something you fear having to overcome, but something you feel grateful for, because through it, you came home to yourself. And if today you find yourself in a dark phase, do not blame yourself. Remember, every sunrise is born from night. Carl Jung once wrote, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. But when you dare to do that, when you dare to embrace all the parts you once felt ashamed of, once despised, once ran from you, do not just heal, you awaken." And perhaps in the end, lighting the lantern does not mean driving the darkness away, but realizing that light and shadow were never separate. They coexist, like the rhythm of the soul's breathing. If you have ever feared the darkness within yourself, perhaps it is time to light the lantern, not to banish it, but to see more clearly. Remember, the love of your life does not come to make you happy, but to make you whole. Jung never saw love as something sweet, pleasant, or merely to be enjoyed. He saw it as a mechanism of spiritual evolution, where the soul is forced to grow. That is why true love is not always warm. It will make you tremble, sometimes lose direction, and sometimes want to give up. But in that very moment, you are being reborn. If you have ever felt the activation of the anima or animus, ever dared to look into your own shadow, ever experienced meaningful synchronicities, ever been awakened by multiple versions within yourself, and finally felt that the story of your life suddenly made sense, then know that you are not just in love. You are walking the most sacred path a soul can walk. Jung referred to it as the journey back to the self. And the final question he left for each of us has never grown old. Are you brave enough to walk that path? Keep this dialogue with yourself. If this journey touches you, share it so someone else may find themselves too. And if you are ready, a deeper journey awaits you.